In our next session, we're going to take a deep dive into the current food policy landscape and what it means for efforts to protect and expand nutrition security. So joining us, we have Crystal FitzSimons, the president of the Food Research and Action Center, also known as FRAC. Give her a round of applause. And bringing back to the stage, Kathleen Merrigan of the Swette Center to moderate this conversation.
That was a good kickoff, actually, Crystal, for our conversation. So if you don't know FRAC is one of these fierce advocacy organizations fighting against hunger for nutrition assistance in our nation's capital, and I follow everything they do. So as organizers, we didn't want to host a summit on food as medicine in a bubble, without conversation about some of the harsh realities of what's going on today. And the senator maybe took a little of your thunder, Crystal, but what should people know about what's going on? Can you just update us?
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for having me here today. It's really great to be in conversation and in community with you all. Well, so as many of you probably know, and the senator alluded to when he spoke, they made significant cuts to the SNAP program. And for those of you who are not familiar with the SNAP program, it's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It was the new name. It used to be called food stamps like 20 years ago. And it really is our nation's lifeline, fighting hunger. We have 42 million people in this country who rely on that program to put food on the table, including kids, parents, seniors, people with disabilities, veterans, so it really does, communities across the country rely on that program. So last summer, Congress decided to cut it by about 20%, or close to $200 billion, and that is a significant cut. And the way it is going to play out is that millions of families, millions of people are either going to lose benefits completely, or they're going to see their benefit level cut. And so there's a whole group of people who had not been required to meet these time limits, which FRAC has always opposed, but requiring older adults and veterans and people transitioning out of foster care and people who are unhoused would now be covered by these time limits, where they would have to demonstrate and do a lot of paperwork to show that they were working or volunteering for 20 hours a week. And we fear that many people will lose their benefits because of that. It was the first time, and I think it's really important to think about this, thinking about the fact that we're, going back to 1945, they actually took away SNAP benefits from our humanitarian immigrants. So most immigrants are not eligible for SNAP, but we've always wanted to provide support to our humanitarian immigrants, our refugees, our asylees, people of domestic violence, people who have been sex trafficked, have always had access to SNAP. That has been taken away as well. And then one of the other big things that they did was they actually are transitioning for the first time costs of benefits to states. And so we're really worried about how that's going to play out for states, because if they have to cover these costs, they are going to have to look at their state budgets and figure out whether or not they should increase taxes or cut other programs. And it's going to be putting programs that are really important, like education, against Medicaid and against SNAP. And so we really see this bill as kind of a call to action of what we want our country to look like. And in FRAC's opinion, we really do not want people to be hungry. We want people to have access to the food that they need and a healthy diet with dignity. So that's kind of what's happened in the budget reconciliation bill last summer. I did want to lift up two positive things, because I always like to focus on a little bit of the positive. And one is there is a tremendous movement for healthy school meals for all, which really does make sure that all kids in school have access to the food that they need and are able to learn and focus and concentrate. And at this point, we actually have 9 states, New York became the last one last summer, who have a statewide policy to offer free breakfast and lunch to all of their students in school. And then we actually have about 60% of schools across across the country who are offering free meals to all their students. And then with WIC, we were able to maintain full funding through the appropriations bill on the Senate side, so that we're hopeful that we'll be able to maintain WIC and the fruits and vegetable and the funding that supports that program. So there are a few positive things, but we do actually have a long road ahead fighting back on some of these challenges that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's a lot. Thank you for that. So I can't believe I get to be the first person to say this. I don't think you said it earlier today, Danny, the expression, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? We're all familiar with that. And instinctively, I think we all sort of agree with it, understand it at some level, that good food can keep us healthy. But I want to talk about the economics of hunger, I suppose. Can we put this notion into dollars and cents? Have you encountered any economic data that underscores the value of good food as proactive healthcare that saves money?
Yeah, so I would start by saying that the cost of food insecurity and hunger in this country is about $160 billion annually in direct and indirect healthcare costs. So those are real costs that our country pays. SNAP, if you participate in SNAP, your healthcare costs are estimated to be about $1,400 less per person. WIC, which serves pregnant women, postpartum women, and young children and infants, that actually has been shown to reduce healthcare costs significantly as well. For every dollar that we spend on WIC, it actually reduces the immediate birth costs to Medicaid by somewhere between $1.77 and $3.13. So that actually is a pretty significant financial impact, in addition to the fact that we're getting healthier babies who are going to grow up to be healthier. And then there was actually a great study that came out a year or two ago from Tufts, which actually looked at the value of healthy school meals for all in Massachusetts. And they found and predicted that that policy, by making sure that kids had access to breakfast and lunch at school, would actually save the state about $157 million annually in healthcare costs and productivity as well.
Wow. You're like a walking data bank. That's really impressive. Okay. So I don't think any of us can keep up with you and FRAC on food insecurity data. You guys own that space. I bow to your mastery. But even on a college campus, and many of us are faculty here, I find that data only goes so far, that stories of real people and their experiences, putting that face on the data really helps us absorb it, process the information. You know, I really heard the story of Senator Gallego's hunger, food insecurity as a child, and I'll remember that for a long time. So do you have a story or two to share that with us that relates to food as medicine to help us think this whole issue about, think it through?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would just start by saying, school meals, there's research out there that shows that they are some of the healthiest meals that kids are eating. Kids get higher nutrients that they need. And so they're really important in supporting health. And they do serve about 30 million kids across the country on an average school day. And so healthy school meals for all is kind of an approach that we've been working on for a long time at FRAC. And one story that actually has stayed with me for probably 15 years, because we've been on a long march towards free school meals for all. We got a call at FRAC from a grandma who was raising her granddaughter. And they were in Michigan, and the granddaughter had just started school. And she got through the first week of school, participated in school lunch, and at the end of the week, she got to the end of the lunch line, and the lunch lady took the lunch away from her and threw it into the trash because she had accrued unpaid school meal debt. The school had not yet processed her school meal application, so she was actually eligible for free school meals. And that is a common thing. And, there's a lot of pressure on schools to break even within the school cafeteria for sure. And so a lot of schools may not offer meals to kids who either don't have cash in hand or money in their account. And that story was happening quite a bit, and we did hear it. And you actually can't take that back. Like the message that you send to a child that you would rather put the food in the trash than let the child eat it is just outrageous. And there's a lot of pressure on schools there. But those kinds of stories, which actually were going viral before the pandemic, really drove the conversation about healthy school meals for all. Because, kids are in school for 6 hours a day. We all know they need access to food. Any parent knows what happens when their kid doesn't eat. And we need to make sure that kids have the nutrition they need to focus and learn and concentrate in school. But that story really does help tell the story about why it makes sense to feed all kids and make sure they have access to it. So that's one story I would lift up. And on the SNAP front, we do spend a lot of time collecting stories from people. And there was actually one really moving story that we collected from a parent in Tennessee, a single parent who talked about how they felt like they were just drowning and trying to make ends meet, drowning and trying to put food on the table, and that when they were able to participate in SNAP, it gave them a bit of a lifeline where they were able to pay their rent, they were able to buy slightly healthier food, and it really did make a huge difference for them. So, the federal nutrition programs, they're boring to think about, although I spend a lot of time thinking about them. But they really do have this huge impact on people's life every day, and they really do help keep hunger at bay and improve nutrition and health for people.
Great, thank you. So we're sitting here in the College of Global Futures. By the way, there are some chairs down here for people who are standing. You just walk and take a chair if you want. And it's a little uncomfortable for me to talk about this, but I must. So some of my grad students a couple years ago did an in-depth study on food insecurity in the College of Global Futures, and they found that 27% of students reported being food insecure. I'm sure, that tracks with a well-cited Hope Center study that said 30% of students in four-year institutions are food insecure at some point in their studies. I find this conversation hard to navigate with people. I have actually had pushback. People say, well, if they can afford college tuition, they should be able to afford ramen noodles. I had ramen noodles when I was a student, and I'm fine. Help me with this pushback. Give me some words.
Yeah, I think I've talked to some of those same people too, actually. But I find it's really helpful to tell the story and paint the picture of what is really going on. So on the one hand, it's actually really positive. We have more people in college who come from poverty, who come from, our first generation students in college. But food insecurity in college students, not surprisingly, kind of mirrors what's going on in the rest of the world. Kids who have transitioned out of foster care are more likely to experience food insecurity in college. Students of color are more likely to experience it. Students who are parents are more likely to experience it. Students who grew up in poverty or were food insecure are more likely to experience it in college. And so it is real. People do have it. We need to do a better job of making sure that students in college are able to access the supports that they need, which includes SNAP, and if they're parents, the child nutrition programs and WIC. Because the worst thing that can happen, because kids do drop out of college, I guess they're not really kids, but I'll call them kids. They drop out of college because of financial pressure. And then you have the worst case scenario possible, which is where they have student debt and they don't have their degree. So we need to be doing everything we can to support students who are in college so that they graduate and they can, take the promise of higher income and all of that comes with a college degree.
Yes, good. Okay, this is my last question for you. There's the world as it is, and then there's the world as it could be. Leave us with some inspiration, perhaps a call to action as well. If you were given a magic wand, how could this conversation about food as medicine bring about system change, transformation of our food systems? What's on your mind?
Well, I would say if I had a magic wand, I would wave it and I would make it the vision that we have at FRAC, and I think a lot of people in this room have as well. And that is that everybody has access to a healthy diet with dignity. And, in order to do that, there's lots of different policy levers that you can pull. But I think that's where we need to start. We need to start with the vision that we have for our country, and we need to be talking about it, because the conversation that's happening in DC is not a conversation that has that vision for sure. And we need to be talking about what we want, that we don't want people to be hungry in the United States, that we want people to be able to access healthy food, that we don't want people to have chronic disease and everything else that goes along without having the healthy food that you need. So, I would recommend, increasing SNAP benefits. You increase SNAP benefits, the quality of the food increases that families are able to purchase, free school meals for all. All kids are able to then experience the health and educational benefits that are linked to participating in school meals. WIC, having healthy moms and healthy babies, I think is really, really important. Having healthy meals at child care centers and summer food sites and summer EBT, and making it easier and more accessible, and ensuring that there's no stigma to access the food that you need and everybody's able to do that. So there's lots of things that we can do. I would also say that, there is a link between wealth and health, and we need to also be thinking about how to combat poverty. We need people to have livable wages. We need to have guaranteed basic income. We need to think about our tax system and making sure that it's as fair as possible. Earned income tax credits and child tax credits and all those core pieces, I think, will help support families. But I think we really need to focus on the vision that we have, and we all need to work together to achieve it.
That's great. And I will add something there. For many people here, they know I'm essentially a creature of Washington, D.C. And while I have pushed some agenda there, and I'm proud of some of the stuff I've done, a lot of innovation doesn't happen in Washington, D.C. It happens out in the countryside. Right. So we've got people here today who, at the reception, for example, could be standing around one of those round cocktail tables and come up with a really great new idea to pilot. We don't have to say what is needs to be always what is. We can be imaginative. We can be in collaboration, in community, as you started your talk, and do some great things here in our hood. All right, let me thank Crystal for a wonderful conversation.